Okay, our next review is going to be Into the Game Dungeon Crawl Quest, a LitRPG adventure wizard warrior quest, written by C.A.A. Allen. Okay, this one is 350 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Live real, play real, and just try not to die for real. Riff Jenkins is having a bad day. He's behind on his college tuition and is getting kicked out from his dorm. His girlfriend just broke up with him for playing computer games too much rather. And if that isn't bad enough, Riff hasn't been able to beat the goblin boss in Dungeon Crawl Quest despite many months of trying. His brother Mack says it's a glitch that DCQ is unbeatable, but Riff knows there's a way. When a mysterious package arrives from the recently deceased DCQ developer, Riff finally gets his reward for being one of the game's top players, a special Grimoire, and an invitation to one of LA's premier gaming dens. But the Grimoire is much more than it appears. When Riff sinks into a computer at the den, he's virtually transported to the game. And his bad day just got worse because the company that owns DCQ will be shutting down the servers at midnight if Riff and his band of misfit players can't beat the goblin boss and save the game. Oh yeah, if the servers go down while they're in the game, they'll all die for real. Sorry, that was part of the story that kind of annoyed me. Honestly, the story actually starts out pretty decently. The real-world section, which is essentially described in the novel description, is the first 1 to 12%. It establishes the main character's personality, the reason why he's sent to the game, some urgency of why he has to beat this boss, and I think it's actually handled really well. I think it's probably my favorite part of the story, which is saying something that I like the real-world part better than the game part. By the 12% mark, the main character is in the game, and the story is it's absolutely the RPG. There's RPG progression, RPG world, all that's there. There's no question about it here. Unfortunately, while the story is LitRPG, it has some serious story issues. And from the earliest parts of the in-game storyline, there are just these big plot holes that only got worse as the novel went on. I felt like sometimes when I was reading the story, some game rules or some world rules are just arbitrarily made, and then they were ignored or broken entirely to advance the story plot. Characters sometimes had foreknowledge that they shouldn't have, or just unexplained knowledge, it would say something or they would know things that was just explicitly there just to advance the story without ever explaining how they got that information or giving some kind of justification. And those little things that I know they bug me personally. Or just NPC characters who are supposed to be programmed in just spoke in ways that didn't make sense contextually. Either if it's either somebody obviously would have either programmed them in, or if it's a really transported to a game world situation, then why are they speaking that way if they have no cultural connection to our world? And it's just things like that. Even at one point, the main character even teleports people into the game world from the world without ever having those people connected to a VR system or having them ever play the game. There's really no setup for this, no explanation why it's possible. It just sort of happens. And that happens as the story goes on more and more frequently, events like this. And it's just this is not turning out as well as I was hoping it was going to. And it just kept getting worse and worse as the story goes on. It all kind of culminates in this ending where the big issues, the big conflicts are magically resolved in ways that are just super one-way. It's literally this ending. And so it's I'm not going to say the actual ending. It's our group has solved the big conflict, and the bad guy's no, I have a twist. You haven't really solved that conflict, and the good guys are essentially oh no, look, we have now, and they end. I was and it sounds silly, but that's what it feels like to me. That's the ending this novel feels like to me, and it was just super frustrating for a lot of. So I could think it's at the beginning, starts out well. But it's not a good thing when I like your real life storyline in the beginning more than I enjoyed your game world stuff. Like I said, it was just, I really try to overlook a lot of the tiny things that didn't make sense. But the bigger plot holes and some of the forced story elements, I just couldn't. It was super frustrating for me as a read, and those elements ruined the parts of the story that I actually enjoyed. And I wish it wasn't the case, but it was. For me, I couldn't enjoy the story. I actively disliked it because of those elements of it, and it gets a score of 4 out of 10 for me. That's Into the Game Dungeon Crawl Quest, a LitRPG adventure with a score of 4 out of 10.